10 more seconds. 10.
Wow. Okay, y'all, it's really okay, so curious this week. Best thing. You got your phone back. I'm not sure. Play game. Okay. Who else? Thing that happened? Yeah. With yourself. Where did y'all go? Wow. Wow. She was really lovely. I love it. I love it. You'll fall in love. Okay. All right. One more. Best thing that happened this week. Yes.
The U.S. women's hockey team won gold.
So where are you from?
America.
The northern half, maybe?
Like here.
Really? Really? That's awesome. Okay. I love asking that question because the best thing that happened really forces you to notice what you have to be grateful for. And it's really easy for us to not notice the things that are going well because there's always something that's not quite going well. Have you noticed that? And sometimes we focus so easily on it. So as I'm talking tonight, I'm going to be sharing some from a field called positive psychology. I went to grad school to study positive psychology. I promise I did not make up the term positive psychology. I know it sounds a little like, oh, just study positive thinking. But traditional psychology tends to focus on fixing what's wrong with people. And that's really important because some of you have issues and we need to be able to work through those issues, okay? I've had psychology help me. Okay, we got anybody here with issues? Anybody with issues? Y'all are so honest. Okay, those of you who did not raise your hands, you really have issues, okay? You really have issues, okay? Traditional psychology is important because we need to understand how to deal with things like depression and anxiety and even more serious issues. But positive psychology is the study of what happens when things go right with us. What is it that happens when you succeed, when you are happy, when you bounce back from setbacks, when you discover your strengths and you tap into them? What happens exactly when you express gratitude and all the positive emotion that it releases? So when I discovered that this field existed, because it's fairly new, I got pretty excited about it and went back to school. So when I talk about this subject, brave enough to succeed, I'm going to just, every once in a while say research says or blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about positive psychology. So this book that I wrote, Brave Enough to Succeed, really came out of the fact that for years of coaching people, I discovered that pretty much the main thing I coach people around is getting unstuck. In some way, whether it's in relationships or in finances or in school or in your career or with your health. You want to lose weight, you lose it, then you gain it back. There's so many different ways that we get stuck. And I've been stuck in a lot of ways in my life, and I started to think through what is the common denominator of things that have to occur when you find yourself stuck. Sometimes you're stuck in simple ways. There's a difficult conversation that you need to have, but you feel afraid to have it. There's a goal that you'd really like to go for, but you doubt that you can actually achieve it. There is something you want to do. Maybe it's a major you'd rather have, but you don't want to go tell your parents about it, and you're trying to decide, do I do what I feel called to do, or do I do what everyone else expects me to do? Whatever the case, all of us at some point in life find ourselves stuck. Anyone in here felt stuck before? Anyone feel stuck right now in some way? Usually there's some way that we find ourselves stuck. And the fact of the matter is, the only way to get unstuck is to find your courage. And sometimes it's those little ways that you have to be brave. And we tend to think that bravery is like this big thing, but it's really those small moments when you finally speak up for yourself, or you finally tell the truth about something that needs to happen. And truly, the first step to getting unstuck is just telling yourself the truth, being honest with yourself about what you want and what you don't want. So when I say I found myself stuck in a lot of ways, I can name a few of them. For example, I mean, you all look really smart. I know you're here at ASU. You're pursuing your degree. You're all really bright, right? Are you sure? Some of you don't look sure. Okay. My college career was not very traditional. My mother put me in school really early, so I graduated high school a year early, and then I went off to college. I thought I was going to go to the University of Colorado. I mostly grew up in Colorado, although I was born in Florida and lived in Germany. But when I was in 5th grade, we moved to Denver. And so I had gotten into University of Colorado, Southern Cal, Florida State, got scholarships to all of them, but I had senioritis really bad. I don't know if any of you had senioritis at all. I'm sure you don't even know what I'm talking about. My mother thought, maybe you need something a little different. Well, there was one other school I got accepted to. It was the last school I got my acceptance letter to. And I will never forget that day because I walked to the mailbox, and when I opened it up, there was this big catalog envelope, and it said presidential appointment on the outside of it. Now, I had applied to West Point and decided I didn't want to be in the Army, but I had also applied to the Air Force Academy, which is what I had written my term paper about in 9th grade, and decided that's where I wanted to go. I'm an Air Force brat. My dad's retired Air Force. It's the biggest tourist attraction in the state of Colorado, so I wrote my paper on it and said, that's where I'm going. So I had applied. I kind of had decided by the spring of my senior year that maybe that wasn't where I wanted to go. But when I got that appointment, I just couldn't believe it. And I remember calling my dad, who was stationed in Korea that year, and it must have been like 4 in the morning in Korea, and I said, Dad, I got to read you something. And I started reading this letter that says I had gotten a presidential appointment to go to the U.S. Air Force Academy, and I had never heard my dad cry. And he started crying, and I heard him yell down the barracks, my daughter got into the Air Force Academy! And I was thinking, I want to go, I just got to read you the letter. And so my parents really thought otherwise, and so I decided to go. And it was truly an honor to be there. But I got there, and I got my grades the first time. And I had a 1.4. Did y'all think you could get a 1.4? It's really not that hard to do. It just seemed like everything just went downhill, and it was a rough year. I was in the hospital 3 times. I had surgery. Only time in my life I've ever had surgery. My parents divorced that year. And more than anything, I realized it wasn't my passion. You can't do things just because everybody else thinks it's cool and everybody else thinks it's great. But you have to want it. So I stayed there. I was on academic probation the entire year. And I got to the end of the year, and I decided to leave. And I had lost all of my academic confidence. I just felt dumb. All my life I've been praised for being smart. And here I was failing, getting C's and D's in classes. And so I got to the end of that year, and when I left, it was too late in the year to apply anywhere. My parents had divorced, and my mom had moved to California, so I thought California sounds really, really cool. California gets hyped up a lot. So I was like, I'll go to California, I'll go to community college for a couple semesters while I figure out where to transfer to. And that's what I did. So I started at a service academy, and I got to community college, and then I decided to transfer back to one of the schools I had gotten into out of high school, which was Florida State. And I got to tell you, the difference between going to the Air Force Academy and Florida State is like night and day. It was like culture shock for me. I was like, people come to class like late, or they just don't go sometimes. You should be marching towards the academy 5 seconds late to class. But what happened was I'd lost so much academic confidence that I was so focused on proving I was still smart, because that was so much a part of my identity. And I felt like I can't prove it from my GPA, maybe I can rush through school. And that's what I did. I went to 3 colleges in 3 states, 3 years, and graduated. But when you're trying to prove something to everybody else, you always push the finish line out. Anytime you're overcompensating, you always do that. So I went off to grad school at Florida A&M, which was about a mile from FSU. historically black university. I had never been in a predominantly black environment, and it was awesome. I was like, wow, like everybody pretty much looks like me, 80% of the people, and I didn't have to think about it. Like everybody looked like me, so I'd never had that experience. I wasn't a minority, and it was an awesome experience. Even though that my professors were very diverse, there was something about that that was so very affirming. But I rushed through that experience too. So remember, I was trying to prove that I was smart. So I finished my master's degree in journalism, and I was 21. You know what's a good idea to do when you finish grad school? You know what your parents want you to do when you finish grad school? Get a job. They want you to get a job. And I had just started enjoying the journey. I tell you that because so often we find ourselves not doing things because we feel called to do them, because it feels right for us, but because either we're trying to impress other people or we're trying to undo something. And what's more important is that we learn from our mistakes. There's a really interesting concept called growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Some of you may have heard of it. A researcher named Dr. Carol Dweck, who's out at Stanford. She would study kids who were in gifted and talented programs. And she started out having them solve increasingly more difficult puzzles. And she would basically watch their reactions, so especially the reaction they had when they got to the puzzle that they could not figure out, so it got too difficult for them to solve the puzzle. And what she noticed is the majority of the kids, like about 70% or so, when they got to the puzzle they could not figure out, became extremely frustrated. You know, they might slam their hand down on the table and the pieces would go flying everywhere, or they'd get really down about it. But about a quarter of the students, when they got to the puzzle they could not figure out, seemed to actually get excited. Like they put their hands together and really lean into it. And she started interviewing those kids because she's trying to figure out, why are they excited? And they would say things to her like, well, it's a puzzle, so there must be an answer. I'm about to learn something. She said these kids have what she called a growth mindset. They believe that where they are today is just a starting point, that there's so much more potential that's possible. So they believe they could actually get smarter by putting forth more effort. It's a really interesting concept because most of the kids didn't think that way. Most of the kids really saw their intelligence as being set. They'd always been praised for being smart, and in some ways they were praised for not even having to try. If you've ever bragged about how you didn't study for that test and you still got an A, I won't ask you to raise your hand. That's an example of a fixed mindset, and I surely had a fixed mindset because I was so focused on trying to maintain the fact that I was smart. But you could have a fixed mindset in any area. You might be a really good athlete. You might be really, really attractive. You might be very talented and artistic. And so you've been praised for whatever that one thing is. And then you don't really value the effort. In fact, you define yourself by whatever that is. And what I would like you to encourage you tonight to do is to understand that where you are right now is just a starting point. There's so much more inside you that it takes a great deal of courage to say, all right, I don't know everything. There might be some things I'm not very good at, but there's a lot left for me to learn. So I'm going to share 7 things in particular. They spell out an acronym for purpose. And I like to start with this idea of purpose because I think that when you discover what your purpose is, and all of us has one, then you get clear about what the vision should be for where you're going forward. Your purpose answers a very, very simple question. How is someone's life better when they cross paths with you? How is someone's life better when they cross paths with you? When I got out of grad school in journalism, I decided to go into public relations. And in about 2 years, I had started my own PR firm. And I was really good at it, because communication is just something that always came naturally for me, but I didn't feel passionate about it. And I just began to wonder, why am I here? I don't think it's this. And I had an epiphany one day when I was about 26, that my mission was inspiring people to live more fulfilling lives. That I would do it through writing and through speaking. But really, when I look back, I can see kind of the little pieces coming together at a very young age, and I'm sure the same is true for you. So, for example, when I was a kid, I loved to talk. I'm I'm sure that's very shocking to all of you. But my mom even said she used to play this game because I talked so much that we would play a game to see how long I could go without talking. And apparently, my record was like 2 minutes, okay? So even when we look way back, I always talked, which is something that I loved doing. And I would do nursery runs, and I would stand up in front of the family, and I'd say, Georgie, Porgy, pudding and pie, and everybody would go, oh, that was so good. It was like nothing really, but it was, you know, it was something to me. And I loved writing. I loved writing. I was naturally good at it. In fact, I had a second grade teacher, Miss Johnson, who said I was a good writer. You ever teachers tell you were good at something and you didn't question it, you just took it and ran with it? That's what I did in second grade. I was like, Miss Johnson said I'm a good writer. She's a teacher. She must know. I never questioned it again until I got to grad school of journalism, and I had a professor, Dr. Workman, that would like mark up my papers with red ink. And she was giving me B's and C's, and I was like, this is writing. Miss Johnson said, I'm a good writer. Like, what's wrong with you? I didn't say it exactly like that, but she probably gathered it in my attitude when I walked up after class. And she said to me, I'll never forget, she said, you know, you're pretty good. She said, but you write with really big words and long sentences. And I was like, yeah, isn't that impressive? And she said, you're studying journalism. You're not studying to be impressive. You're studying so that people can understand the information. The average 10th grader should be able to understand you. Without Dr. Workman, I would not have gotten better. I had a little talent, but she really stretched me. And it's so important for us to always be looking for those people who can stretch us, right? But whatever your purpose is, there are seeds of it. Some of you are already doing it. You just haven't necessarily identified it, but it answers that simple question. I think sometimes we really make it complicated. You hear purpose and we think, oh, I got to write like 4 pages about what it is. And, no, it's just a simple sentence. Some of you are great problem solvers. Some of you are great at entertaining. Some of you are great at connecting people. Some of you are bridge builders. Some of you are, I mean, you know what it is for you. Some of you are great at teaching. Whatever it is that you do, that people's lives are better when they cross paths. I was speaking several years ago in a town called Saskatoon. Do y'all know where Saskatoon is? Exactly, I didn't. Usually I get a call, like Marisol calls, hey, you want to come to Arizona State? Yeah, I've heard of Arizona State. They called from Saskatoon. It sounded like maybe where Bugs Bunny was from. We Googled it. It's 800 miles north of Minneapolis. Did y'all know you could go that far north? And they called me in November, and so I went. It was really cold, as you can imagine, going that far north. People were very friendly. I had to speak 3 times that day. I don't know if you've ever spoken in front of a group, but no matter how good you are, if you speak 3 times, there's going to be somebody that's starting to get tired, right? And so it was like after lunch, the 3rd time I spoke. But I got to tell you, from the very first time I got on that stage, there was a woman in the audience who was just giving me energy, okay? Like, she was giving me life. Every time I looked at her, she was smiling, she was nodding, she was like nudging her girlfriend, like, this is good stuff, no pressure, you guys. And so afterwards, like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Well, it's the 3rd time I was talking. And I saw a couple of people yawning. And it was starting to mess with my confidence. I was like, where's my girl? Where is she? Sure enough, 10 rows back to my right. She was still nodding. She was smiling. She was nudging her girlfriend. She's like, write that down. That's good. Write it down. I don't know if that's what she said, but that's what I told myself. That's my confidence. And afterwards, she like came to my line. I'm signing books. And I said, I remember you. You're like 10 rows back, a little to my right. She said, do you remember where everybody was sitting? I was like, no. I said, especially not the yawners. I don't know where they were. I said, but I remember you. Is your mission in life just bringing joy to people? She was like, I've been trying to figure out what it is. Can it be that simple? I said, yes, it can be that simple. She was so excited. The next week, I got an email from her. She was like, I went back to work and I told everybody, my purpose in life is bringing joy to people. And they all looked at me and said, yeah, we know. Right? Because whatever your purpose is, you're impacting people. They already know it. Like, you probably take it for granted to some degree because it comes really, really naturally to you. So do we have any joy bringers at ASU? Okay, we got a joy bringer right there. The rest of y'all just bring, okay, we got, see, he won't even claim it. You're pointing at him. So we got 2.5. We got 2.5 joy bringers. The rest of y'all just bring everybody back down to earth. Is that what y'all do? Okay. I just want you to know the purpose is at the center of everything when it comes to your success. It's going to be easy for you because it's something that comes naturally to you, but it's going to impact other people. It's not just about you. It's not a job title. It's how you impact people in the roles that you're in. And whatever you end up doing, you can always go back to purpose. So let me share these things that I've learned from positive psychology, and these are strategies around getting unstuck. Oh, and you can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. All right, so purpose. The P in purpose is positive emotion is a success strategy. I love this. So research shows that it's not just that, well, usually we think if I'm successful, then I'll be happy, right? So we think success causes happiness. But it's actually the other way around. So research actually shows that happiness isn't just correlated with success, it actually causes success. That when they follow people over time and they measure how much positive emotion they have, what self-reported, I can't tell you whether you're happy or not, right? So you're the only person that can decide how happy you are, right? But when they look at the levels of positive emotion, what they find is people who have more positive emotion are more likely to get promoted, they're more likely to get raises, they're less likely to get sick, they're more likely to be in great relationships, and they actually live longer. Positive emotion releases chemicals literally in your brain and in your body that help you to be stronger and to be healthier. It does a whole lot of other things too, which I find very exciting. So we know, for example, in companies, high-performing teams have more positive relational behaviors, meaning people tend to listen to each other more. People tend to celebrate wins when they happen. They tend to take breaks, right? They have idle chit-chat. So we know, for example, within a company, when people just kind of go to the water cooler and talk for a few minutes, they're actually more productive and more creative. All of those things produce a level of positive emotion. But also, positive emotion not only helps you to be more creative, but it helps you to make better decisions. Have you ever done something after you got really angry or irritated with someone, and then later on you thought, maybe I shouldn't have done that? You ever been in that circumstance? She's like, yes, it happened yesterday, right? So basically, here's what happens. Positive emotion actually broadens your scope of thinking. There's a whole bunch of research on positive emotion from Dr. Barb Fredrickson. She's at the University of North Carolina. She wrote a book called Positivity. And it's really amazing what she found. So basically, when we are in a positive state, like something funny just happened, or you went to a funny movie, or perhaps you just went for a jog, because movement is actually a happiness trigger. So when you get just 20 minutes of exercise, it'll boost your mood for up to 24 hours. What she found that is when we're in that positive emotional state, we actually make better decisions, and that's because it broadens our thinking. We actually see more options. But when we are in a negative state, like we're really irritated with someone, or we did not get enough sleep, or somebody made us angry, or any number of things, it narrows our scope of thinking. In fact, I bet you've seen this happen before. Somebody, maybe they just annoy you a little bit, okay? You may have someone in your life like that, right? And then they do something that bothers you even more, okay? And now all you see and all you think about is all the other times they've done something to annoy you. Have you ever had that experience? So you were actually doing fine, and then they said something really crazy, and now you're like, you know what? They said something like that last week and last month. They said something like that last year. Why do I keep hanging out with them? We start to see all of the negative things that happen. It's called negativity bias. Once we're dealing with something negative, we start to see even more negative. And it might not just be the one person. It could be that you're in a negative state, and now you see negative things about other people. Are y'all with me on this? And so when we are in a negative state, it's not a good time to make decisions. Anytime you need to make a decision, make sure if you're in a negative state of mind, just if you can postpone that decision, maybe sleep on it a bit, it's always a really good idea. So positive emotion in that way is a success strategy, but because it helps us see more options, we actually create a better vision when we are in a state of positive emotion. So here's what I want you to do, and just take a moment to do this. If you clarify what success looks like, What's really important is that you actually take the time to imagine what it might feel like. Now, this produces a little bit of positive emotion. So I'm going to ask y'all, if you won't fall asleep, I'm going to ask you to just close your eyes for a moment. Take a nice deep breath. Close your eyes. I can see you. I'm looking right at you. All right. Take 3 nice deep breaths. Some of you haven't had a deep breath all day. And I want you to just picture for a moment what you'd like to see different or better in your life. It could be 3 months from now. It could be a year from now. It could be 3 years from now. You pick a time. What is the vision that you have? What does it feel like when you get up in the morning? What kinds of things do you get to do? Who do you get to impact? What's different in your life than the life you have right now? Take one more deep breath. Can you see it? All right, you can open your eyes. Wow, some of you, I just want to know what the vision is. Some of you are like, oh, this is so good, Valorie. This is so good. And then some of you look like this. I can't see it. I can't see it. You know, sometimes having a good vision takes a little bit of time. Sometimes we know. And sometimes in the midst of really dreaming about what we want, there's one emotion that tends to pop up that causes us to kind of downsize what the dream is. Anybody know what that emotion is? Fear. It's fear. I'm going to talk a little bit more about fear in a minute. But one of the things we can be afraid of is uncertainty. So the UN purpose is this. Uncertainty is opportunity. A lot of times we want to know everything that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, who it's going to happen with. And life just doesn't work that way. Whenever we have a vision that's big enough, it's going to take us out of our comfort zone. And I don't know why we expect to feel comfortable when we're not in our comfort zone, but usually when we get out of our comfort zone, we get really scared. Oh no, but it's something that we should expect, that fear is inevitable, but it's not a stop sign. Fear is inevitable, but it's not a stop sign. I learned a really big lesson about fear when I was about 11 years old. My parents are both from South Carolina, and I would spend all my summers there. And so that particular year, when the summer was over, my grandmother actually flew back to Denver with me. And it was great. She was there for like 3 weeks. She'd bake cookies every day, meet me at the bus stop. It was awesome. But one Sunday, while she was visiting, we went up to Estes Park. Has anyone ever heard of Estes Park? Okay, the highest paved road in the world is in Estes Park. It's beautiful. It's in Colorado. And we're driving up the mountain, and we're going, basically we go across the Continental Divide, and we get pretty high up, right? And I learned the meaning of the word breathtaking that day because we got up so high, we decided to kind of hop out. There was a valley, and so I remember looking over the side of the road, and literally I just went, so it took my breath away. I was actually looking down at the clouds. We were about 14,000 feet above sea level, and it was just spectacular. So a few minutes later, I had another breathtaking moment because we got back in the car, and we're driving, and the road starts to get more and more narrow, and actually, when you get almost to the top, the road just becomes a single lane, and then you have to go down the other side. But you know how there's rails up in the mountains? You know what I mean? Like, you really want to know how strong those rails are, and I started to notice that the rails, like, they would just stop. Like, there'd be rails and then no rails, and then they would pick back up. And I was only 11, but I was wondering, like, did somebody plow through these rails and, like, go over the edge, or did the workers just get tired right here? Like, I was wondering what was going on. And my grandmother must have been thinking the same thing because she was digging down in her purse looking for her blood pressure medication. And she started yelling at my dad, "Junior, turn this car around." And my dad was like, "Mama, I can't turn the car around. It's just one lane." And right about that time, I had to go to the bathroom. So it is just like chaos, right, in the car. And my dad's like, "Look, there are no bathrooms up here. You're just going to have to hold it. It'll be like 30 more minutes. We'll be back down the mountain." And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to cross my legs, hope for the best. And we keep driving, and I'm thinking there's got to be a bathroom somewhere. About 5 minutes later, we see a lodge, okay? And I'm like, oh, yes. We pull into the parking lot, but it's a Sunday, and the lodge is closed. But there are like 6 porta potties at the edge of the parking lot. And I'm thinking, jackpot, right? So I hop out of the car, I run over, but I'm really focused, and I'm really not thinking about like what might be on the other side of the porta potties because they were facing away from the parking lot, so I had to like go around to find them. So when I turned the corner, there was a moose standing there, okay? Have you ever seen a moose up close? Yeah, a horse has nothing on a moose, okay? This thing was huge and it had those big old antlers, and he just stood there real, quiet and confident, and he was looking at me. I could have sworn he licked his lips, like cocked his head to the side, like, she looks good, tasty, chocolatey even. Right about then, I decided I do not have to go that bad. So I backed up, I ran to the car, I hopped in, I closed the door. My parents were like, that was fast. I said, yeah, there's a moose over there, I'll be fine. And my dad was like, okay, he starts to crank up the car. But you got to remember my grandmother's still in the back seat. Now, I know she never saw a moose in Anderson, South Carolina. Okay, they don't have them down there. But she acted like she knew what to do, and she looked at me like she was really aggravated that this moose would try to intimidate her grandbaby. And she said, come on here. Now, I don't know how many of you have Southern grandmothers, but let me just explain. When your Southern grandmother says, come on here, do you know what you do? You come on here. You don't ask any questions. I'm like, she must know something I don't know. She grabs my hand. We march across the parking lot. We turn the corner. The moose is still standing there, but this time it's grandmama and the moose, eye to eye. And she looks at the moose like it's a poodle. And she says, go on now, get. And the moose turned around and walked away. Now, I tell you that story because your fear is like the moose. Sometimes you have to talk back to it. Don't pretend it's not there. And you got to talk back to it like you mean it, okay? So I'm going to ask y'all to just practice this with me for a moment. All right, I know we're in Arizona. Do we have any Southerners here? We got like 3. So the 3 Southerners, y'all understand that, okay, you know that it's not like go on now, get. It's like one syllable. Go on now, that's like one, okay? Get, okay? So I'm going to ask y'all to just do that. Will y'all play with me, okay? On the count of 3, all right, okay? 1, 2, 3. Go on now, get. All right, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. But, I mean, I want you to think about, like, what are the fears? What are the fears that you have? Because in your life, it's not what happens to you that matters most. And research shows this over and over again. It's what you say to yourself about what happens. When you're facing, like, I said I've been stuck in a lot of ways. One of the ways I found myself stuck in life was in relationships, right? If you've ever been through a bad breakup, there's a couple of ways you can handle it. Like, you can say, my life is over, I must not be that great, blah, blah. Or you can be like, you know what, they missed out. Or, you know what, that just wasn't meant to be. Like, one of the things I learned early on was not to take things so personally. Everybody does what they do for their own reasons. So difficulties happen in our lives, but the question is, what do you say to yourself about what happened? Do you say there's something I can learn from this and I'm going to move forward? This might not have been the direction I was supposed to take. What's my vision from here? Or do you take it so personally that it paralyzes you from being able to move forward? So it's not what happens, it's how you process what happens. So resilience is largely about how you process adversity. When I've had my company does a lot of resilience training, but we also I've also had the opportunity to do resilience training for the military. And the process that we teach really comes out of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the idea that you have a trigger, a stressor, something that occurs, and we tend to think that our reaction is about the stressor, right? So, you get cut off in traffic, you get aggravated, and we say, well, why was the person aggravated? I mean, in Atlanta several years ago, we had someone cut someone off in traffic, the other person took out a gun, it became this whole road rage thing, right? Any of you in here ever responded that way to getting cut off in traffic? Don't raise your hand. Okay, don't do it. But how many of you got cut off in traffic sometime in the last year? Anybody? Okay, and how did you respond? Y'all are real quiet about this. I don't know what y'all do when you get cut off. What's a good way to respond?
Go on down, kid.
That's highly effective. I love it. I love it. I love it. That was good. Anybody in here just don't get excited or aggravated when someone cuts you off? Is there anyone like that? Okay. So what do you say to yourself?
Usually it's like about that person's day and they are just like nearsighted and aren't paying attention to what's going on.
Oh my gosh, you've given them a medical condition. So they must be nearsighted. I love that. I love that. They're having a bad day and they're nearsighted. Just let them go on that. Okay, so here's the thing. One person gets cut off and they go into road rage. The other person gets cut off and they just put on the brakes and slow down and they're nearsighted. You know, whatever. So here's the thing. Both people have the same stressor, but a completely different reaction. So the difference isn't about the stressor. Two people can have the same stressor and have a different reaction. The difference is, what did they say to themselves in the heat of the moment when it happened? Because your thoughts are what produce your reactions. And sometimes you don't control the first thoughts that come to you, but you can step back and say, is this thought helping me or is it hurting me? Is this thought going to get me closer to my vision or is it taking me further away? I mean, this happens in the simple stuff too. Like you're trying to be really healthy, but your roommate just had a birthday and the cake is still in the kitchen. And you wake up and it's like 2 a.m. and you remember the cake, but you're really trying to eat well, but you're like, everybody's asleep. Nobody will know if they ask what happened to this extra piece of cake. I'm going to deny it. Like you have all of these thoughts that are going through your head, right? In that moment, you could go all the way to the kitchen. You could be there at the cake. You could be like about to grab the cake. And you could still stop yourself in that moment and change your thought, right? So just because we have a thought that's unproductive doesn't mean we can't change our thoughts and create a new reaction. Are y'all with me on that? So it's really about how you process adversity. So you want to be able to pinpoint your thinking style. The most successful people have an optimistic thinking style. That doesn't mean they're optimistic about everything. It means that they're optimistic about their ability to work through challenges. They see the challenge, but they believe they can gather up the resources and find their way through it, find the people that can help them through it. Those with a pessimistic thinking style, when they fail in the face of a failure, they say it was all me, it's going to affect everything I do, it's going to last forever. Those who have an optimistic thinking style say, well, there were other factors that were involved, and this is just temporary. It happened this time, doesn't have to happen next time. It's just this one area of my life. It doesn't affect everything that I do. Okay? So the events of your life don't create your reactions. Your thoughts about the events create your reactions. So I want to share these 4 core fears. So we talked about fear of uncertainty, but fear of success. A lot of times we think it's just fear of failure, but fear of success. Anyone have any idea why we might sometimes fear success? Any ideas? Exactly. Did you say that? You said that. Yeah. So there's a lot of responsibilities. So we might be afraid that if we succeed, can we continue to handle the level of responsibility that comes with success? What else? Oh, wow. So sometimes we don't feel like we're deserving of that level of success. Yeah, that's a good one. I heard someone over here. So success brings attention, and attention brings a lot of pressure, doesn't it? So fear of success oftentimes is about even being able to sustain that level of success. Like you succeed at a high level, people expect you to keep doing that. In fact, you may have noticed when you're good at something, people just keep giving you more of it to do. So you're like, okay, success might actually mean more work on my behalf, right? So there's a lot of pressure that comes with success. The pressure to keep succeeding, the level of responsibility, and sometimes it's just that constant, can I keep it up? Can I keep it up, okay? So if you've ever had those thoughts of, gosh, I did well last time, but I think I'm going to disappoint them, or they're going to find out that I'm not as great as they thought I was. There's something called the impostor syndrome. That fits into fear of success. Then, of course, there's fear of failure. If you were taught failure is the worst thing, then oftentimes you won't go for anything that you think you might fail at. So you'll keep the dream or the goal small so you can succeed, which means you never, ever end up realizing your own potential. Then there's fear of disapproval. This is my core fear. Fear of disapproval is really fear of rejection, right? When you're always thinking about what everybody else is going to think, which I think in our current culture is easier than ever, just because Everyone has a platform. Everyone's got social media. Everybody's trying to show the world what their lives look like, or what they would like them to think that their lives look like, right? And so when you think about the like button, the love button, like that can be addictive. Don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about, right? That sometimes being able to control that can get very difficult because we are always wanting that sense of approval. And what that can mean is that that approval can control us. That we won't do things if we feel like everybody else isn't going to approve of it. Or we won't ask for what we really want if we think we're going to be rejected. These are all things that can keep us from having the level of success that we want. And then the last fear goes to uncertainty. It's fear of losing control. Do we have any control freaks here at ASU? Any control freaks? Okay, just a handful of control freaks. I don't even believe that. I think some of you are very controlling. Some of you are trying to control whether everybody else in the room knows that you're controlling, so you won't raise your hand, right? So that fear of losing control is, I want to know everything that's going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and if I don't know, I won't take a step forward. Whatever your core fears, you probably identify more with one of them than the others, and it probably shows up in multiple ways in your life. I'll tell you how this showed up for me. About 9 years ago, I found myself going through what was my biggest fear, which was a divorce. Nobody gets married expecting to go through a divorce. I mean, most people don't. There's a few like reality TV people that might do it for publicity. But generally speaking, we don't expect to get divorced. And I found myself going through divorce, and I remember a very pivotal moment. I knew what was going to happen, but sometimes you're going through something difficult, and then finally it just really hits you, like it really sinks in. And that particular day, it was really sinking in, and I was at home by myself, and I was in the kitchen, and I just started crying. And the crying got more and more uncontrollable until it was really like wailing. You ever heard of wailing? Like, I had heard of it, but I thought it was an exaggeration until I found myself doing it, and I thought maybe I'm going crazy because I'm typically somebody that's fairly in control. And I thought in the midst of that, things like, my life is over, my fear of disapproval, what are people going to think, all sorts, am I going crazy? And I thought in that moment, I need to call somebody, because if you have a bad enough cry, you really don't want to waste it on just yourself. Do you understand what I mean? Like, you need somebody to witness it, because if you try to explain later, no, it was bad, it was really bad, they're going to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, that sounds terrible. I needed somebody to witness it. I thought, who should I call? I decided to call my mom, right? She knew what I was going through, but she'd never seen me quite like this, and so I called her. I couldn't even get the words out. She didn't know what was going on, and finally she heard me saying something like, my life is over, and I think I'm going crazy, and I think I'm losing my mind. She was like, what? And I knew, just by that tone of voice, that I had called the wrong person. You understand what I mean? Because when you want somebody to feel sorry for you, don't call your really resilient friend or family member, right? Because at some point, they're just going to be like, look, I know it's rough, but you're not the only person. And I was like, that's not who I am, and that's not who I'm going to be. I'm going to learn something out of this, and I still have a vision for what I want for my life. I still want to be happily married. I still want to be a mom. And I was 36 at the time. So believing for that was not the easiest thing in the world. In fact, sometimes I felt really foolish for continuing to believe it. Sometimes I beat myself up for waiting until 30 to get married. I thought to myself, why didn't someone tell me earlier not to just plan for my career, but to plan for my relationship? But you know what? Life doesn't always go the way you planned it. And it takes a lot of courage to say, it hasn't gone the way I planned it, but I still have a vision for where I want to go. And I'm going to still take the kinds of steps that might, just might, lead me there. I want you to remember that, because no matter how much you plan, some stuff's not going to turn out the way you want it to. But I can promise you that in the end, if you stick with it, if you operate in courage, if you're true to yourself, it might turn out better than what you planned. So take a look at those fears and think about which ones might threaten to stop you. Which are the ones that you need to look at and say, go on now, get. All right, so let me just share these last ones. I'll share them fairly quickly. Replenish your reserves. So there's something called goal fatigue. When you have a lot of goals, you can sap your energy, and it's really, really important that you take the time to celebrate wins, to rest in between wins. You know, you've got a whole series of exams. Maybe you just need to do nothing for a while, because it takes a lot of energy to meet your goals. And sometimes we just burn out if you continue to do that. All right? So you want to be able to build up your reserves. Self-care really is not optional if you want to perform at a high level. Got a lot of notes. Okay. So here's what I want you to think about. When you think about all the things you have to do, and some of y'all are super, super busy, some things you need to not do right now, you need to delay them. Some things you need to delete from your list altogether. That feels really good. There's some stuff on your list that's really not that important. Just let it go. Some things you need to delegate, like somebody else could do it. And some things you need to just put on autopilot. I mean, it's kind of like when you're paying your bills and you're like, okay, just take that automatically out of my checking account. Those are things that allow you to have more energy, so you have less that you actually have to think about. The second P in purpose is put things into perspective. You always want to be asking, what do I have control of? What opportunity do I have here to make a change? When I talk about putting things into perspective, there's something called catastrophizing. Anyone ever heard of catastrophizing, like in a psychology class? A few of you. Catastrophizing is when something happens and you just automatically go from 0 to everybody's dead in about 10 seconds. You understand what I'm saying? So it could be something as simple as you're meeting your friend at Starbucks and they're 5 minutes late and you start catastrophizing about what's really happening, right? And you never tell them that, because when we catastrophize, our thoughts are pretty ridiculous, right? So if we said them out loud, we'd realize how ridiculous they were. But here's the thing, when we catastrophize about things, it's like worst case, irrational scenario of what's about to happen. And it's typically something that's not actually going to happen. And so it's really important that you notice it, that you stop it by saying, well, what's the best case, equally irrational scenario, right? So your friend's 5 minutes late to Starbucks. You've come up with this crazy thing that's happened, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's pretty tragic. If you were to stop yourself and say, well, what's the equally irrational best case scenario? Your friend's 5 minutes late. What's something wildly, ridiculously good that could be happening that caused them to be late? Anybody? They won the lottery. Okay, how much did they win? Anybody in here got some ideas for how much is enough? Anybody? $100 million. Okay, that sounds good. All right, so they've won $100 million, and so why are they late? So they just went on and stopped off at the dealership on the way to see you. Okay, and they're picking you up a car while they're at it, right? Okay, there we go. All right, so when we stop and we start thinking about equally good, irrational things, we jolt ourselves out of the negative, irrational things, and then we can say, what's the most likely thing that happened? They're 5 minutes late. What happened? They're in traffic. Anything else? They spilled coffee on themselves. They had to change clothes. Really simple stuff. They're wondering how they spilled coffee when they haven't made it to Starbucks yet. It's okay. It's okay. So we have to put things into perspective and simply ask ourselves, what's within my control? What's not within my control? And this goes back to what I was telling you a moment ago. You have your trigger, your stressor, your thought, and your reaction. And when we catastrophize, it is really the exaggeration of this very process. All right. The O in purpose is operate with optimism most of the time, okay? So optimists, on average, actually live longer than pessimists, okay? So there's a lot that comes with optimism. Part of it is it produces a lot of positive emotion. Remember I was telling you happy people actually live longer? So optimism is really important for leadership and for goal setting. Have you ever had a leader that was really pessimistic? Like imagine working for a manager that's like, we got this big project. You know, you guys are, you're pretty average. Hopefully you can carry this on, right? Not particularly inspiring, right? When you're in leadership, you have to be able to help people see what the possibilities might be. You want to be realistic about it, but you need to be able to be optimistic, okay? So this isn't, though, about just positive thinking, but accurate thinking, okay? I live in Atlanta. If I needed a ride back to Atlanta, and you were like, hey, I just want $100 million, I bought a car, I'll drive you back, okay? And I'd be like, okay. And then you said, I think we could get back on a tank of gas. Let's just think positively about it, okay? Would we make it to Atlanta from Phoenix on a tank of gas? No, right? We don't. An electric car. We still have to stop and plug in, though, right? Okay, thank you. He's like, well, yeah, okay. All right, so it's not just positive thinking, it's accurate thinking. The most successful people are able to think accurately and to see what might go wrong, but they're optimistic about being able to overcome it. Some jobs actually train you to be a pessimist. Any idea what those might be? Security guard, yes. Police officer, first responders. Any other jobs? Yes, an insurance adjuster. They've got to assess risk, yes. Actuaries. Wow, that sounds so sexy and exciting. Yes. Requires some pessimism. A bill collector. Yeah, oh my gosh. Mortician. I've never heard that one before. So you guys are right. Even attorneys, right? The only lawyers that don't need to be super pessimistic are going to be litigators. If you've got to get people off all the time, then it's better for you to be an optimist. But generally speaking, lawyers are trained to see everything that might go wrong. Your surgeon, you want a pessimistic surgeon doing your surgery. You understand? Accounting and finance, like you don't want the optimistic accountant doing your taxes, okay? Go ahead and write that off. The IRS doesn't do many audits anymore, okay? So, but some jobs you really need a degree of optimism, all right? Teaching, marketing, anything that's in sales, and no matter what your job, if you're leading people, even if you're an engineer or a surgeon, you need to turn off the pessimism when you're leading and turn the optimism on, okay? All right, so your attitude, oops, I'm sorry, I'm headed into the last two. Attitude is contagious, but that goes for optimism as well. So the last two, serve as you lead. Not just what can I get out of the situations that I'm in, but what can I give? When we stop and ask that, we go back to the core of purpose. And research actually shows that our attitudes are contagious. When we're leading other people, it's contagious. You've probably noticed that if you've worked with people who are either really positive or people who are really negative. They basically infect everyone else. So what kind of contagious leader are you? All right? Again, not just what can I get, but what can I give? And most importantly, purpose is so important because purpose actually fuels perseverance. When I think about the moment that I discovered my purpose, it was a long, long time ago. I remember the exact date. It was July 10th, 1999. I was standing in a Barnes & Noble. I just felt like, don't laugh. I know it was a long time ago, but you don't have to look at me like, oh my gosh, 99. Okay. But purpose fuels perseverance. There have been so many times along this journey, I'm on my 12th book, that it just felt like, this is hard. I mean, if you look up like the top 10 high-growth jobs, no one says, oh, become a motivational speaker and write self-help books, right? This is a career path where you really have to make your own way. But knowing that this is what I was meant to do allowed me to endure the things that were very difficult until I got to the point where it just started to take off. Purpose fuels perseverance. When you get frustrated, if you have purpose, you understand why you need to stick with it. But if what you're doing is something that doesn't feel purposeful for you, when it gets difficult, it's very easy to just say, forget it. This really doesn't matter all that much. So purpose is essential, and it fuels your perseverance. All right, here's the last one. Embrace the journey. Find your flow. Your flow is that point where your skills, your talent, actually meet the challenge in front of you. When you've got the skills for it and the challenge lives up to it, then you're excited. You're in flow. When your talent is too great for the challenge in front of you, but you become bored, you've got to find that place where they flow together. Celebrate milestones. I've talked about that. Know what your happiness triggers are. You saw some of the quotes Maricel had up here for my book, Happy Women Live Better. Some of my favorite happiness triggers: anticipation, having something to look forward to, and thinking about it very intentionally. Have something to look forward to this weekend, even if it's really simple, because when you have something to look forward to, it gives you a boost of energy. Stop talking about what you have to do. Start saying, I get to go to school. You know what? There are a lot of people all over this country who would love to get to come to ASU. You get to be here. So stop talking about how you have to, I have to go to class, I have to. Just say, I get to. It's a way to encourage anticipation. Another great happiness trigger, very, very simple, gratitude. We did that in the very beginning. Just write down, what was the best thing that happened today? Why was it so great? Actually boosts your energy, makes it more likely that you will sleep more deeply and sleep longer. Play is a happiness trigger. Guys tend to bond side by side. Research shows this is why guys love, video games, basketball, golf, wrestling, whatever, right? Women, we tend to bond face to face, right? So I'll say, hey, let's go to Starbucks and just chat. Guys don't usually just say, let's go just sit down and chat, right? But for us, it's a happiness trigger. But I got to tell you, play is really, really powerful, because if you can find things you do just for the joy of it, it produces a lot of positive emotion. I love to play tennis. I'm not good at it, but I like to play it. I only play with other bad tennis players. You understand what I'm saying? I think you can choose your sport by the outfit. That's perfectly legitimate. And so I'm not trying to be Serena. I'm just out there playing. It's good exercise for me, right? Find something you don't have to be good at, because there are a lot of things you need to be good at. You always have to have something that you do purely for the joy of it. Y'all with me on this? And then here's the final, and I think easiest happiness trigger. It's smiling, okay? I don't know if you realize this, but we think that we smile because we're happy, and that's true. But did you know that even if you don't feel particularly happy, if you smile, like a real, what they call a Duchenne smile after the French physician that discovered it. Y'all can do this. She's good. Look at you. You got this big smile. Okay, so your cheeks puff up, your eyes crinkle. Can I see your smiles? Okay, oh, that's really good. Now, I want you to keep smiling, and while you're smiling, I want you to think about someone who gets on your nerves, okay? It's really hard to be aggravated while you're smiling. Now, here's the reason. When you smile like this, it actually, the muscles that contract actually trigger the release of serotonin and endorphins to the brain. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? Like, your body can produce drugs. All you need to do is just smile. Are y'all with me on this? So the research shows that even if you don't feel like smiling, you can just put a pencil between your teeth. You will still trigger the release of serotonin and endorphins to the brain, okay? If you don't have a pencil, a nice hard E sound. Are y'all with me on this? E. Do you feel the serotonin? You will still release serotonin and endorphins to the brain. Now, I started out saying positive emotion is a success strategy, and I can tell you for myself, even personally, I found it to be true. I remember just a few years after I got divorced, I was about to turn 40, and I was at home. I was like making up my bed one morning, and I was like praying about it, like I had prayed like 200 and something other times. But this time I was like, I'm going to be 40 in a few months, and like I'm not even dating somebody. So maybe you could like speed it up, Because, I've been talking to my doctor, and the doctor said, look, you look young, but your eggs are still old. So, you might want to get with it. And so it was so interesting, because my prayer was something like this. If you could just fix this problem, because I just want to be happy, if you could just fix this. And I distinctly heard in my spirit, Valorie, there's nothing to fix. And I was like, yeah, there is. I'm about to be 40. There's something to fix. I was like, there's nothing to fix. Just be happy right now. Be happy where you are right now. I know that sounds so simple, But it was a decision. Because I couldn't control when and how things were going to happen. But I could control whether or not I decided to be happy while I was waiting. And so often we hold our happiness hostage to our circumstances. But the research shows happiness is not about your circumstances. It's about how you choose to walk along your entire journey. So you can be miserable while you're waiting for your goal, or you can choose to have joy while you're waiting for your goal. And I literally decided right then, you know what, I'm going to be happy. My life is good. I'm healthy. My parents are still around. When my parents were my age, their parents were gone. I have a lot to be grateful for. And amazingly, when I decided to be happy, something very interesting happened. One day I was on I was on Facebook. And I have a ton of high school Facebook friends, and so one of them had been walking through the Atlanta airport and saw my book, Successful Women Think Differently. And he was like, hey, that's Val Burton. He picked up the book. He took a selfie with it. He tagged me on Facebook. And so, some of our friends are like, oh, I'm sure if you try hard enough, you could be a successful woman, too. I mean, go ahead and get the book, And so we just kind of started communicating, and I was like, oh, you're in Atlanta. Yeah, maybe we should have lunch sometime. That's what he said to me. I was like, okay. He said he was a pilot. I was like, I travel. I wonder if you ever fly my plane. Well, I don't know, but we can make our paths cross. Y'all know where this story is going? So we met up for lunch. We never were really friends in high school. We just had mutual friends. And as soon as we met up for lunch, I just felt something. I know that sounds really crazy, but I did. And I had always written the names of, if I had daughters, what their names would be. One of them was Sophia Grace, which is actually 2 names. The other was Olivia. And so Jeff, he kept telling me, look, I have to leave by this time because I got to pick my girls up from school. And he kept talking about them. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm being rude. I never asked him what their names are. So I said, oh, what are your daughters' names? And he said, well, the oldest one, I named her. Her name is Sophia Grace. If this happens to you, don't tell the guy that you wrote the name in your journal, okay? Just don't do that. So I was like, that's nice. I've always liked both of those names together. That's nice. What's the other one's name? He said, oh, well, my youngest one, her name is Addison Olivia. It's like, y'all, stuff like that just kept happening. So literally a little over a year later, the love of my life, who walked into my life after I decided to be happy regardless of what happened in my life, showed up and we got married. And in 2015, we adopted a baby boy, Alexander, who amazingly people stop us constantly and tell us how he's the perfect one. Oh my gosh, you have your mommy's eyes and your daddy's hair. We go, you think so? I could not have created, I don't feel for myself, a better life. And I never would have drawn it out the way that it happened. And I would not be the person I am if I had not been through what I went through and going through divorce. I would not have been ready for my husband. And I can't explain why it had to happen that way, but I tell you that because things will happen in your life, and you need to be brave enough to believe that your vision is possible and that it doesn't have to happen exactly the way you thought. But whatever happens, find your joy. Don't hold your happiness hostage to your circumstances. Don't say, I'll be happy when this happens or that happens, but I'll be happy while I'm on the way to what happens. Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want to take questions at all? Or?
If you have time, I'm happy to. Thank you. Thank you.
Valorie is willing to take a few questions, and then we're going to be doing a book signing and book sale right behind the amphitheater. So are there any questions from the audience that you would want to ask in the group? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind just staying seated for just a few more minutes. We actually are going to raffle 3 books signed by Valorie, Brave Enough to Succeed, so we want to make sure that you win. And then give us an opportunity to go up and get her seated so she can do her book signing. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do, so just hold tight a little longer. But before we do that, I just, on behalf of ASU, on behalf of the First Year Success Center, we just wanted to give you a small gift that means a great deal to us, to tell you how much you mean to us. So we have a new ASU Personal Success swag bag, but what we also have in here is something to acknowledge who you are to us. Many people tell me as a founding director of the center that I'm the mama of the center. I'm the mother of the center, and that's really a blessing to be called that. If I'm the mama, Valerie's the godmom. And so I want you to know that we think you're number one. We think that you are part of us. And on the back it says, in Spanish, madrina, which means godmother. And a godmother is somebody who imparts and develops you, who blesses you, who has so much to do with your legacy, and who does so, and it is a position of honor. So you are officially Dom, the godmother of the First Year Success Center.
Thank you.
And that's for you.
Thank you, thank you. That's so awesome. Thank you.
So, okay guys, so a chance to get up there, and then we'll have a line for those of you who want to meet her. Book sign, there'll be book sale, several of your books on sale. I believe you have a couple of different books with you. And thank you 1,000 times on behalf of the First Year Success Center. We hope to see you next month at our next speaker. And of course, continue to look out for her as she does what she does. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's CaPP